Parenthood was a mass shooting that happened in Colorado Springs. This was Thanksgiving of 2014, 15, something like that. Anyways, so at that time, no one on our department, unless you bought them yourself, had rifle rated plates.
How is that seen, like buying plates yourself? Is it just normal or frowned upon? Or
I didn't buy them. A lot of the guys who either had, for us it wasn't SWAT, it was TEU, Tactical Enforcement Unit. So a lot of the guys who had like tactical aspirations bought them on their own. One of my close friends bought them on his own.
Okay.
So it wasn't seen as anything
like, don't do this.
negative. It was just like, we're not providing them for you. Like we're providing what at the time, because this was before, like, I mean, obviously there were school shootings and stuff like that that had taken place before, but this was before like all those things really started. Like,
the nation wasn't hyper aware of rifle,
right,
AR shootings.
Yeah. It was just more handgun.
Yeah.
At least those were the things that officers were generally.
So you guys had a 3 or a 3A that you were normally wearing?
So our normal body armor was a 2.
Oh, really?
Our normal body armor was not rifle rated at all.
God, so one punch and you're dead, huh?
So, yeah.
Golly.
So, funny story with that. I remember when I was very first on, I got sent, and then I'll get back to the Planned Parenthood. I got sent to a call, and it was the guy's garage door was open. It was the people across the street that were calling it in, and it was like, guys in the garage, it looks like they're arguing. One of them has, what looks like a rifle. And I'm like, okay. So I respond. And I wasn't even thinking like our plates aren't rifle rated at the time. I respond, we always park a couple houses down and walk up, and I'm using their cars for cover. And I don't know if it was an M4, if it was M16, what it was, I can't remember. But anyways, obviously a rifle. And he's just like in the garage. They're obviously all drunk. And he's just like, with his rifle. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess, I have my vest on, and I didn't even think at the time, like, this isn't going to do anything for that. So I kind of ducked down behind one of the cars and call out. Unfortunately, despite being drunk, they were all cooperative. But the Planned Parenthood thing is what really set off us getting these rifle-rated plates. At the time, it was, I can't remember what company it was, but they were basically the same plates that we wore plates, in the military, hard, super heavy, So like the only time you wore them is when you are going to an active shooter situation.
So this is like a trunk vest,
yes.
if you will. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And, the crazy thing is that I think that a lot of departments started getting those, and yes, it was exactly that, just something that was in your trunk, or if you had room in your passenger seat, because we were never partnered. We were only partnered up if we had, like, more people on a shift at one time.
Yeah.
And then generally it was like, hey, you want to bake her up tonight? Like, and you're just getting together with a buddy to, like, go run calls all night. But other than that, all your gear was generally in your passenger seat. Okay. So a lot of people would put their vests there as well. But what would happen a lot on these, school shootings, because of course we would watch all the videos during lineups and stuff like that. And these officers would get criticized for, like, taking the 2 minutes that it takes to go to your trunk and throw on this vest. Or for us, it was like, don't even get to the call. Like, when you get the call, like, when you're getting information from dispatch, get out of your car, put your vest on during the drive, so you're showing up ready to go. But even that,
there's just so much risk involved in any decision you make.
Right. Right. And it's all liability stuff, because that's the thing, is everything's going to be criticized on the back end. So Planned Parenthood happened, I think, either 2 or 3 people were killed, and then there was an officer that was killed who was um, part of the college. So like our colleges out there had they were sworn officers, but they were not part of our department.
Gotcha.
So they would respond to like major calls that we would get, but they generally dealt with stuff at the college.
Okay.
But they would get made fun of a lot by the college students until
they weren't real police officers.
Until they got put in handcuffs, because then the college students realized like, oh, you're like an actual police officer, not a college security guard.
Yeah.
But they did not have the same training that we did.
That makes sense.
So he was shot and killed during that incident. And then after that, we started getting, our department at the time had around 700 sworn officers. So we started getting sponsorships. Like basically like a local church would sponsor an officer, and then they would fundraise and provide the officer with like a full kit.
Wow.
So it would be a vest, Kevlar, like helmet, like everything as far as that goes. And then what ended up happening is one of the officers that responded to the Planned Parenthood incident, he ended up leaving the company or the department and started what's called Shield 616. So they're like a national nonprofit now. But he would partner with the churches, and then that's how the donations funneled into our department.
So it wasn't even direct funding from taxpayer dollars
to
pay for police officers' ballistic vests.
Yes. No, it was all, and I think it still is that way. And this is 10 years later.
Holy moly!
But yes, the plates that we were getting were the super heavy stuff. So like we would go to like an active shooter call, and obviously a lot of times those calls come in as one thing, but they're not actually an active shooter. But you're sitting on this call for hours wearing this freaking vest and just like, what am I doing? So they ended up partnering. Shield 616 ended up partnering. Have you heard of Angel Armor?
Mm-mm.
So Angel Armor makes rifle-rated plates, but they're like super light and super thin. They're still a stiff plate, but they're just they're light enough that some guys on our department at least were wearing them always.
Gotcha.
And obviously, I think that kicked up a notch as well as more incidents with rifles took place. But yeah, nothing was ever department provided as far as a rifle rated.
Interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about the risk that you were talking about earlier about the trunk vest or the passenger seat vest.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the risk involved in suffering all day long having it on versus having it next to you versus the 2 minutes to put it on or trying to put it on while you're driving and then you get into a car crash or you wait 2 minutes on the scene and put it on, and X, Y, or Z happens. And it's just like there's always something horrible that could happen no matter what you choose. But that was one of the main things with our vest is that how comfortable you are is a huge factor in one, getting people to wear it when you're not watching, but two, how like aware you are, situational awareness after wearing this thing for 4 hours. I saw soldiers hiking up mountains in Afghanistan just absolutely suffering with side plates, front back plates, carrying X, Y, or Z, a piece of equipment, a Thor on your back or something like that, and you're getting up to 4,000 feet in elevation, and guys are just unable to even look around, let alone be aware of who's looking at them at that point. So it's just that was one of the main things was how do I get this thing to be just like super comfortable, or at least significantly more comfortable.
Right.
And that's where that design came in of curving the hexagons to make it so it bends to you.
Yeah.
So I've been doing Murph in that vest at least twice a week now for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And just seeing, you know, is it actually better? Is it more comfortable when you're breathing heavy and all that stuff? So, you know, it's definitely different. It's definitely when you're taking those big breaths, you can feel it conform and expand with your chest as opposed to the hard plate, which just pushes on you the whole time. I mean, Murph sucks, so there's nothing, nothing you're going to do to make it feel better.
Yeah.
And then there is a difference on the pull-ups because it's all just upper body strength.
Yeah.
So if you can shave ounces off, I mean, or grams even, it's a big difference in the pull-up capability. Which I don't know how applicable that is to everyday life, but, you know, when you're huffing and puffing, it's a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think any amount of weight that you can save, especially, you know, whether it's military or police, for us, our firefighters, so we had, our tactical unit had, I can't remember what they called them, but basically it was like 2 firefighters that were actually assigned to our tactical unit because they had like the medical experience.
Yeah.
So they would get sponsored and would get kits as well.
Interesting.
But whatever it is, right? Whatever first responder or military, you know, whatever profession you're in, you're needing to wear something like that. Security.
Floor 10, floor 11.
You know, like,
running upstairs.
Yeah, like whatever it is, any amount of weight you can save is huge. Yeah. And what it really boils down to, like we were saying, I mean, the reason why guys don't wear them all day is not because they don't recognize the protection.
Yeah.
It's because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's the handoff between, like, literally, am I aware of my surroundings because I'm so uncomfortable versus the protection.
Yes.
You know? And so, yeah. Well, the other thing about this guy is that it has the capability of a soft plate and the hard plate. It basically takes off all of the negatives of each.
Right.
So sometimes on the hard plates, you would see around, like if you were wearing this and you were in a stairwell, somebody shot you from underneath.
Yeah.
It would ride the plate up and still go into your neck, go into your legs or something, go into your arms if you were, you know, shot from the side or whatever. But a soft plate, it catches it because it hits it. So this still has that capability as well. So you don't get those skipped rounds as far as staircases go.
Yeah.
Which, again, I don't know how often that occurs, but if you look at the percentage of hitting a round like that skips off you, it's pretty significant as opposed to just getting, you know, no one gets a straight shot unless you're on the flat surface.
Well, and most of the time with officer-involved shooting, it's not. Like the Planned Parenthood thing was a guy, you know, with a rifle specifically aiming, you know, at specific targets when officers were driving up or whatever the case was.
Yeah.
And I actually, this was on Black Friday, was like the day that it actually happened. I was actually on vacation, and I just remember, so there was a Chick-fil-A that was right next to one of the police substations that actually was responsible for where Planned Parenthood was at. We just happened to be at that Chick-fil-A, and I just see like cars just like screaming out over and over again. So I end up like calling a buddy, figuring out what's going on. And of course, everyone's calling in like, hey, do you need people to come in, whatever. But I mean, resources, that's the thing that's difficult too. It's like, well, I mean, you can come in, but we don't have any cars right now. So like, and it was, I mean, that day it was super snowy. I mean, they got a ton of snow, so guys were out there, I mean, hours and hours and hours until, you know, tactical figured out like, okay, what are we doing? You know, but yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is comfort, and then probably 1A, 1B is like comfort and weight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and obviously the weight has to do with how comfortable something is or is not.
that's the difference. That's the difference between the rifle plates too, because there's a vast difference between like a 3A versus a 3,
right,
versus a 4. And so like the 4 is like, I mean, that's a big old round that thing's
right.
stopping. How common is it? You know, I don't know, but 5.56 and 7.62 from an AK is pretty small compared to a 30-06.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know what the departmental mandates are these days, but I know for like military, it's 4 or nothing. In fact, the military is classified how they decide which plate to use, but I guess the standard that I would think is somewhere around a 4.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of different problems with adhesion and things like that, because like the current plate is a hard plate, obviously, right. And then they sandwich polyethylene and the carbide together, and it makes like a seal. But you stick that sucker in a shipping container and put it in a rack for 4 months before anybody pulls it out, and you're getting temperatures of 200 plus degrees.
Right.
So
yeah, we didn't have the only hard plate we had. So most of like the stuff that was issued was all soft plates. And really, the only hard plate that we had was less for rounds and more for knives.
Yeah.
So, because obviously the soft plate's not going to do
anything. That's the thing.
Knives, right?
The polyethylene is good for stopping knives too.
Yeah.
A lot of it is cut proof,
right?
Tear proof, which is good. It's a lot better than Kevlar.
Yeah.
Kevlar. I mean, some of these things will get cut right through it, though. Like the stuff that we actually use to cut it into the appropriate shape for the body armor.
Yeah.
That stuff cuts through it like a knife. But when it hits the carbide, obviously, nothing's cutting through carbide. Except diamond. So, yeah. It's, what did you guys use for knives then? Or you just didn't?
That's all we had. We just had that little hard plate. One little tiny hard plate.
Oh, boy.
So, and it was just like...
Little guy.
Yeah,
right in the heart.
Yeah, like right, probably
like a side plate on a 6x8.
Yeah, 6x6, 6x8, something like that.
That's what we use for the side plates now.
Yeah.
Is a 6x8, which that's just immense suffering if you're in front, back plate, both side plates with the rest of your gear moving from point A to point B.
Yes.
It's totally miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah, those HRT guys, or SWAT or whatever they call them nowadays, which I'm sure differs based off where you are. It's all miserable stuff. Oh boy.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that, I know we were talking in the garage earlier about like, obviously what that can stop. I mean, for police purposes, I mean, I think just stopping a 5.56 is like, more than enough.
Yeah.
Because, obviously, like, better than I do as far as the military side goes, because of what you did in the military, what you're facing in those areas, but the likelihood of someone using and accurately firing a 30-06
is pretty small.
Is pretty small.
Very small, yeah.
As far as in the civilian world goes.
Yeah, just the commonality of what different types of AR platforms are out there, AK-47, to the normal populace.
And it doesn't really. Obviously, there's a possibility of anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a possibility that happens.
Sure.
But you're weighing, like, okay, what is the likelihood of X versus the known comfortability?
Yeah.
Of
possibility versus probability.
Right.
Versus the risk associated with that probability.
Which is why before, a lot of these incidents took place, nobody was wearing any of that stuff, because it was just like I'm wearing this literally all day long, and
it sucks.
I just want to be comfortable and to be focused on what I'm supposed to be focused on, not focused on how much this sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, I watch a lot of police videos, and nobody takes into account how long they've been wearing that. You know, it's like the 1 second of incident happening and how that officer responds to whatever it is, and not the 14 hours they just spent sitting there in body armor and doing this and that, and you know,
I think the biggest difference, you know, again, like we talked about in the garage, I was aviation when I was in the military, so I didn't spend much time in body armor outside of, you know, walking from my room to walking to the hangar. 3 of my brothers were all in the infantry, so they did their fair share, obviously, in body armor. But on the police side, the biggest difficulty, I think, that from talking with my brothers to the police side, is you don't have all that information. Like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, it's basically every call is like the possibility that you're walking into an ambush.
Yeah.
Because you're getting, you're generally getting information third hand, you know, from a neighbor or whatever the case is, or you're getting someone who's purposefully lying to you because they're trying to protect themselves. So you're walking into these situations, at least on the officer side. Tactical side's a little bit different because they're getting the information from us.
I mean, even the terminology that you guys use is like you're initiating an investigation, right? When you start, so you don't know anything. You don't know anything about it.
No, you're just walking in blind and trying to figure stuff out. And that's, I don't remember, like I said, I wasn't on when the Planned Parenthood thing happened. One of my close friends, she was actually the first officer that got there, and I don't remember like how the call necessarily came in, you know, but we're trained like, okay, park this far away, do this and that, like whatever the case is. But even those things, when you're pulling up to an unknown situation, you're still doing the best that you can, but you don't really know what it is that's happening.
I remember one time I had a soldier that he had a suicidal incident that we put a stop to, but then our job was to go to his house afterwards and figure out what was going on with his wife. And so we called CID at the time, and me and my first sergeant, we pulled up to his house, parked right in front, you know, typical thing, went to knock on the door, and we had CID with us, and they parked, you know, on the sides, and they were on the sides of the house, and we're all freaking out, like, what's going on? What are you guys, like, prepping for here? And it's like, oh, don't worry about it, you know, it's a normal thing. And then we opened the door, and there were, like, 2 runners at the back that they wouldn't grab. But I remember that. The parking was off-putting to me as a normal person, just knocking on the door, but,
I mean, it's all different things. But the funny thing is so, I mean, not another mass shooter. I was on during this one. Me and my buddy were. So Colorado Springs has, basically, it's like each corner is like 4 different, like completely different cities.
Okay.
So like northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest are like, I mean, literally completely different. So the northeast part of Colorado Springs is referred to as Stetson Hills. That's the name of the substation that's there. If that portion of the city was its own city, it would be like the 8th largest city in Colorado.
Okay.
So like literally every corner is completely different. But anyways, we were in the north, I guess northeast, like kind of central. And my buddy had seen a call that had come in downtown. It was so silly. It was a guy walking around with a rifle, and he had a gas can with him. And my buddy sends a message to dispatch and is like, hey, you know, I'm with whatever my call sign was at that point in time. Can you send us that call? And it wasn't in our division. It was in a separate division. And but there was no other officers clear. And she's like, oh no, we're not dispatching anyone to that right now. And we're like, Okay, so we actually ended up starting driving down that way. And then shortly after, because Colorado's open carry, so as crazy as it may be for a guy to be walking around with a rifle, as long as he's not pointing it at anybody, like it's technically legal for him to be doing that. But dispatch was like, but the gas can thing is a little weird. So like, not him walking around with the rifle, but him having a gas can is a little weird. So then they started sending people. We were already on our way down, and that turned into another mass shooting. He ended up setting his ex-girlfriend's house on fire, hence the gas can. And, it turned into this big to-do. But bringing that up to say, like, even in situations where you're like, this is happening, you're still having to act, like, within the confines of the law. Yeah. It's the same thing like rules of engagement, where it's like, all right, well, we can't do this until this thing happens, and you're constantly in this reactionary state.
My all the different levels of hostile intent, hostile action, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we had a lot of. I was at the tail end of Afghanistan, like 2014, which I don't know, it didn't end until like 2021 or whatever. But that was really the tail end of the actual conflict. Was right in there because we were shutting down different FOBs in Afghanistan, close to the Pakistan border. But yeah, I remember we were just watching people on feeds at one point, and we're going through the checklists, and it's like, yep, we're good to engage. He's clearly putting, it's like feeding IED cords, digging a hole and putting things into the ground, and there's stuff like that. But even then, it was like we had to go through a whole checklist. We had to get clearance. We had to do X, Y, Z. That's why my brother was texting me about the Houthi rebels getting blasted in Yemen, which happened I think yesterday. Okay. And how Reuters was like, he said that Reuters was saying that like we were killing women and children and stuff. And I was like, well, look at the article and read it again. Right. And it's like, hey, Reuters quoted the Houthi rebels saying that they were killing them. I was like, I know all the checks that they have to go through, and I know how immense they are. Right. Yes, things do happen, but they're usually extremely small scale, and this picture that we get is like totally skewed of what actually happens on the ground. So,
well, you look at like what people who haven't been in any environment like that, and so the only thing they know is what they see on TV, right?
And they get a bad read of it too.
What they see in a movie, and they're like, oh well, why did so and so do this, or why did so and so do that? And it's like, well, because in real life, when you get shot, you don't fly back 30 feet like you do in the movies. Yeah. In real life, if someone's coming at you because one of our things was like, well, why did they shoot him so many times? Oh, he only had a knife. Why did they shoot him so many times?
Shoot him once, might as well shoot him 10 times.
And it's like, yes. But it's like, well, they're shooting to stop the threat, right? And people think like, oh, I'm going to get shot and magically fall backwards, and it's like, no, that guy's
still coming at you.
Likely still coming at you.
Likely didn't even know that he was being shot.
And likely didn't even know what just happened, unless you have some kind of fatal shot or whatever that actually does. But it still isn't like, whatever.
I was telling you the other day, it's like we go to the gun range all the time, and it is amazing how bad people are. Even here in central Texas, how horribly bad people are at shooting.
Yes.
7 meters in front of them, they're barely hitting paper. It's like, oh no, oh no.
Yeah. And that's in a controlled environment.
Yeah. I mean, a straight shot, controlled environment, peaceful. Yeah. You got a bench to lean on.
Right.
And horrible.
Yeah, and it's like, go do some jumping jacks, and then, and that's minor cardio exercise,
That adrenaline with the hands is huge, huge.
So yeah, you were talking earlier about like the angled shots with like the stairways and stuff, and for police, most of the time that officers are getting shot, it's not someone actively like I'm pointing my gun at you to shoot. It's I'm running away.
Yeah.
You know, whatever the case is. So it's rare. Well, really, in any situation, right? It's rare that it's going to be this like straight on whatever. Like it's generally going to come at some sort of angle. And on the police side, we're trained to basically be shooting at an angle like this.
Yeah.
So if you do take a round, it's likely coming at an angle, even if it is straight on, just because of your positioning.
Which there's a good deal of flex on the side too with this.
Yeah.
Which one is good for like moving inside of your vehicle. Right. You can actually grab stuff without smacking your upper arms. But also, if you're pivoted, that armor pivots with you.
Yeah.
Even that inch or a couple centimeters is a huge difference when you're shooting on the side and the threat is coming from that side. That's been the difference between life and death for a number of angular shots.
But that, I mean, at a thinner, for police purposes, obviously you reduce the weight significantly. From not having it have to be a level 4 plate, and being able to go down to a 3 or a 3A, and then you got guys who are wearing it always because it's probably more comfortable than what they're wearing right now. On a day-to-day basis.
I think I can figure out how. Well, I know I can figure out how to still get it to stop a rather large rifle round while still being lighter and thinner. Because everything in this current model that I brought here or that we have here is directly in response to the military's plate. And so if I kind of faceted it towards a police plate, I think we can solve that problem pretty easily.
Right.
Because the patented portion of it is that curve of the hexagon, and so that is what makes it so it's stronger. It reduces impact essentially significantly. So we'll see.
Yeah, I know I can't remember what you called it earlier, but basically like how deep the round penetrates. That was like a big deal on the police side.
Back face deformation.
Yeah, because they, obviously want to make sure that if you do take a round that you're still able to function and do the things that you need to do.
For sure,
and and that is, I think, even more important PD wise outside of the tactical realm, because you're by yourself, like so much. Like most departments don't have enough people to be partnered up. And even if you are partnered up, it's likely someone's at the front, someone's at the back, or I'm talking to this person at the front of the house and you're talking to that person at the back of the house, whatever the case. Like usually, even if you are partnered up, you're still separate. But generally, you're by yourself. And you're getting the calls by yourself, so you need to be able to respond to whatever is taking place, and then take care of yourself for at least a period of time until someone else
arrives.
So, but in Colorado Springs, I mean, from north to south of Colorado Springs, I think the north exit is like mile marker like 166 or something like that, and then the south, like furthest exit, is like mile marker like 138. So, and that's 30 miles on the highway.
Yeah.
That's not even taking into someone on side streets or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes, and then that, as unfortunate as it is, that creates this situation, and I'm guilty of it as well, responding to a burglary or something like that, where it's like, I'm not sitting at this, like, yeah, the door's open, I'm not sitting here for 30 minutes. Like, I know where this guy is coming from. Like,
yeah,
this is ridiculous, so you basically end up sacrificing safety for convenience because you're just like, I'm just going to go clear the house by myself. So it's, there's always this like trying to figure out, what's best or whatever the situation is. And I think that was always the thing that was hardest for me. I didn't really have, I hung out with guys who were officers outside of the department, but most of our friends were not police officers. So they had no comprehension of like what it was that I did. And even worse, what it was that Jenna would have to deal with, when I left for work at night.
Yeah.
Because they were all in these standard jobs. And then one of my buddies was a firefighter. And I remember when I was in Afghanistan, one of my brothers, who used to be a police officer, he was like, dude, don't go be a cop. Like, go be a firefighter. It's like, people are happy to see you when you're a firefighter. People don't ever want to see the police.
It's true.
And I was like, oh, that's okay. And I just knew, coming from the military, like, I wanted to go into another service-oriented career. So, like, I wasn't really one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with Jenna about it, and she was like, no. Like, you're not running into burning buildings like that. You're not doing that. So I was like, okay. And because I wasn't, like, truly, like, this way or that way, I was like, all right, I guess we're going to stick with, plan A. And I remember my buddy that was a firefighter, when he was in the fire academy, we had them over for dinner, and his wife was like, hey, so if you guys get sent like a dangerous call and like fire has to go, like, you guys go and make sure everything's safe, right? Like, before fire comes in. And I was like, and Jenna's sitting there, and I was like, yeah. And she goes, and then when you guys make sure that it's safe, then you tell fire, like, they could come in and they come in and do whatever they're doing. I was like, yeah. And she goes, unless it's a fire or something. And I was like, no.
Nope.
She's like, what do you mean? I was like, no, even if it's a fire, like, we still need to go in and make sure everything's safe before fire's coming and doing it. And Jenna just looks at me, and I'm like,
you get that foot to the shoulder to the table.
I was like, yeah, I've responded multiple times to large fires and been the first one on scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just this constant, you're trying to figure out what's best. I remember when you and I first started talking about the plate stuff, and I was just like, man, having a lighter plate. Honestly, that was actually one of the reasons. I don't know if we talked about it before or not. So I got when I was on with the police department, I ended up getting another agency was. Basically, it ended up being a wrongful pursuit. They were pursuing this guy. It started out in county, and then they pursued him into city. This was at like 2:00 on a Friday afternoon. So like, schools are letting out, it's rush hour, like all these things, like just a bad time to be doing what they were doing. Anyways, I was a detective at the time, so I didn't even know what was going on. I was just out basically doing detective errands, and was stopped at a light, and I was actually on the phone with Jenna at the time, and I was like, oh, I gotta go. And she's used to that, and we hung up the phone, and I saw county officers trying to, they call it a TVI, tactical vehicle intervention. Basically, they're trying to take out this car when that happened. And then suspect ends up going westbound in the eastbound lanes and then crosses what was like a 8-lane intersection against a red light. I was like, there ain't no way he's making it through this without something happening. So I turned on my lights and sirens to try and get people to hopefully avoid it. There was someone next to me. Suspect ends up getting clipped by southbound traffic, spins out, and then I move my car just slightly so that basically he would hit the B-pillar of the vehicle because there was someone next to me. So I was like, well, I can't completely move out of the way because then they're going to get hit. And ended up breaking my back from being T-boned. But you know, I was thinking about the vest stuff when we were talking and was just like, man, like having something that would be able to be used at all times was just like, would have been huge. Because I remember after that happened, honestly, like my like fear wasn't even like getting hit. It was, I knew that the other agency didn't train like we did. And now I'm like this in the driver's seat of my car, in an unmarked car.
Mm-hmm.
So county has no idea that I'm a police officer. Suspect is
right in front
3 feet from me. So I drew my gun, but I was like down at like waist level because I didn't want them to see. I didn't want them to see like, oh, who's this civilian
with a gun?
You know, with the gun. But like my biggest prayer during that time was like, don't let this turn into a firefight because I'm screwed.
Yeah.
If this turns into something. Unfortunately, it didn't. But
were you pinned in there too? Because did that push your car into their car too? So you
So I was able to get out of the passenger seat, and then ended up having to, because they didn't have enough people. They left like literally there were like 4 accidents that had happened before this one, and I think they had 2 officers there at the time of my accident, and or deputies, I guess, because they were county. And then there was suspect and his girlfriend that were in the car, so they're pulling suspect out of the driver's seat. So I ended up getting out the passenger seat of my car to help them, and that's crazy what adrenaline can do for you, because I had no idea like what had actually happened.
Wow.
And then, you know, after being on scene for a little bit, I went back to the substation, was like finishing up some stuff, and another detective who's a friend of mine, he comes back and he's like, hey, I just talked to Commander so and so. She wants me to be here while you call Jenna. Put the phone on speaker. And Jenna already knew what had happened. I had already called her and told her what happened. But put the phone on speaker and tell her that if you're in any pain tomorrow, you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, whatever, dude, I'm not. He's like, no, I'm serious. Like, she literally just told me that. And then she comes walking down, and I'm like, okay. So I called Jenna on the phone, and I'm like, hey, Commander so-and-so said I needed to call you, and that if I'm in any pain tomorrow, that I need to go to the hospital. And Jenna's like, are you in any pain right now? I'm like, well, yeah. She's like, then why are we waiting till tomorrow? You need to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and I had some back injuries from the military as well. But apparently I don't know what is upper, middle, and lower back. So I just kept saying it was my lower back, like, oh, my lower back hurts, whatever. And the nurse comes in after doing X-rays and CTs, and she's like, well, you have some fractures here, but like we can't really tell if they're like new or old because we'd have to do a different scan, whatever. And I'm like, okay. I was like, and she's like, and I know you mentioned like a fracture in that area, like from the military, so maybe it's just that if you're just saying your lower back hurts.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, they're like, your back is so broken we can't tell what's new and old breaks?
Yes, basically. So it's all thoracic injuries that I had.
Oh,
and so Nurse Lee, and she's like, but if you're saying it's your lower back that hurts, these are all thoracic injuries. So like, it wouldn't be that. And then the nurse leaves, and Jenna's still there, and I'm like, hey, where's your like lower back and like your middle back? And she's like, your lower back is basically like your butt. Like it's like right above your butt. And I was like, oh, this is my middle back. And so she's like, oh my gosh. And then the nurse just happens to come back in. She's like, tell her what you just told me. And I tell her, and the nurse is like, oh crap. So she ends up calling the doctor back, and I get put in a back brace and yada yada. Basically, the fracture, one of the fractures that was there before, fractured more, and then there were two other fractures that were basically added on. It was a compressed vertebrae is what it was. So when you're
that was the just impact of the okay.
Yeah.
Nothing actually jabbed you or
no. It was just from the impact.
Wow.
But with the compressed vertebrae, so like if your vertebrae is like this, when you get a compression, whether it's the front of it or the back of it, it kind of turns it more into like a triangle. And it heals, but what it does is it heals in that misshapen like form. So our work comp was horrible, and that doctor was like, well, it's healed now, so like you're perfectly fine. Like there's like
perfect.
It's the same. Like it's healed. And I'm like, no, it's not healed. It's hardened, but it's hardened in a way that it's not supposed to be hardened.
But my back hurts all the time.
Yeah. So like the other doctors that I saw who were much better were like, no, like look, the information that I got from the doctor who ended up really pushing for my medical retirement was like, look, the good news is the bones are hardened. There's really nothing that you're going to do that is going to make it worse. Like, aside from some other bad accident happening, like nothing that you're going to do in normal life is going to make it worse. The bad news is that you're always going to be in pain, and whatever you do is going to increase that pain. So you have to decide, like, what are you willing to tolerate? Yeah. And I was like, okay. And he's like, the worst news is you're in a career where you can't just take a time out. You can't just stop doing what you're doing because you're in too much pain. And so you can't be a police officer anymore. You can't do these service-oriented careers where you're not able to say, hey, I need a break, whatever the case was. And even though I was a detective at the time, our department, I don't know how it is with other departments nationwide, but our department, you were required, regardless of what position you were in, you were required to be able to function as a full officer. So like, even though most of my job was at a desk at that time, I was still required to be able,
just in case type situations.
Yeah. And that happened. So my accident happened October of 2019. And then obviously there was all like the insurrection stuff that happened in 2020. So like I wasn't because I was hurt, but our whole unit was part of all the riots and everything that took place. So you're in all your riot gear and everything else.
Oh, wow.
So that was one of the things that I talked with the work comp doctor about. Is I'm like, obviously, like I'm not capable of going and doing this right now, but so.
So did you get medically retired from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're double retired.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, your back is all messed up, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I've had people ask me, like Sawyer will go to youth group, and like I've gone in there to pick him up, and you know his youth group leaders are like, oh, you know, Sawyer speaks highly of you, yada yada. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And they're like, so what do you do? And I was like, oh, I'm retired. And they're like, oh, how'd you do that? Like you look super young.
Thank you.
And I'm like, well,
it's a long story.
You don't really want to retire the way that I retired.
Do you have 53 minutes?
Right. So, but yeah, I remember when you first brought up the vest stuff, and I was just like, man, that seems like just such a cool idea and concept. And I feel like so many people think of things like that, you know, like whatever it is, and don't actually like take it from thought to.
Yeah. It's not a genius. You know, it's like somebody thought of something and I just combined the two things to make a different utility for it. So it's like, you know, you have these ideas and then do you have the funding and the manufacturing knowledge and the patience to work through the probably 50 plus prototypes that I have, you know, until you get to a product that actually does what it's supposed to do. You know, continuously improving it from there. So we'll see. I don't know. But
so what is the plan as far as like getting it out? Like, do you have a plan as far as like
we have
a market?
Yeah, we have a marketing strategy. The very first thing we want to do is start with Georgetown PD.
Okay.
And so that's the key because that's local. You know, it's made in Georgetown, and then it's like, what are their specific needs? Because we can make a particular set that's customized to that location.
Right.
You know, hey, we need it to be cooler, or we need it to be, you know, rated at this X, Y, or Z because that's what we have the most.
You can make it cooler.
We can figure out how to make it cool. So that the silicon rubber that's in there, we can embed it with whatever we want. We can embed it with a cooling device. We can embed it with a heating device. We can embed it with GPS tracker. We can embed it with whatever they need. We can figure out how to do it. And so
that's cool.
If we can tailor it to each thing, each place that we sell it to, especially because a police department is its own, you know, it's its own thing, and so we can get very specific with it geographically wise.
What does that do cost wise? Like if, like say embedding a GPS device, like how would that?
Yeah, so it really just depends on what specifically so say they want a GPS put in there and the GPS is $50. You know, we can figure that into the cost of it and tune it to exactly what they need.
Right.
And we're not, you know, not trying to like profit off of these accessory things. And so it's just like, what is the at cost price of doing that? And then they're purchasing the ballistic vest, which, you know, has a whole operating expense and you know, SG&A and operating expense and COGS. And so we'll factor that into it and we can, you know, essentially bid it, hey, this is exactly what you guys need. Is anybody else doing this for you? Probably not. And so we can give them exactly what they need at a cost that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
And if the cost doesn't make sense, then we can, you know, figure something else out, or we can start some program to fund it, or, you know, whatever they need. But the purpose is to get people what they need when they need it and have it customized to them so that they're, you know, it's police officers and military that we're targeting this store. So we want them to have the best possible equipment that they can get, and we'll figure out how to get it to them. Yeah. Is the goal. And I think if we keep that as the goal in the mindset, I think it'll be successful. Yeah. Because it's not a huge overhead, you know, cost. Right. So, yeah.
And how many can you? I mean, obviously you're working. Yeah, but how?
Yeah, we could scale. How many people were on the police department where you were at?
So We were at probably like 700, and I think they were trying to get to like 950.
Okay. So we can scale that, and I don't know, say they purchase it, depending on what time frame they're thinking. I don't know how their funding works as far as like, hey, we want to do this in the next fiscal year or whatever, or we need this tomorrow. You know? If it's we need this tomorrow, we can scale. Usually in about a week, we can probably scale up to like 50 vests a week or inserts a week, and then that rate basically after a week we can flex drastically one way or the other. So if you give me 2 weeks to make enough for the entire Georgetown PD, I can probably do that. If you need enough vests for the U.S. military, a million vests, then we're talking about next fiscal year, something like that. And
it's all government, so nothing moves. So you're good there.
So it just depends on how soon they need it, and then also what they want it to be tailored to.
Right.
So we can figure that out as well. So I would assume that if you're sitting in your vehicle, you probably have air conditioning, but if you're not, or you're you're trying to save costs or gasoline or whatever the thing is, I would assume that a cool vest is a significant plus for Texas area people.
Right.
So that's
even like the motors officers, like the motorcycle guys. I know that they have different things that'll do.
Yeah. They make ice plates right now, but it's another 10 plus pounds.
Right.
Water is pretty heavy comparatively to everything else. So we can figure that out. It's essentially just a tube of water with a cooling pack that flushes it through the system.
Okay.
For these cooling things.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not crazy technology or anything like that. It's already made, and we're just embedding it into the ballistic plate, which just hasn't been done. So make it simple, make it effective, make it customized.
Yeah.
Make it palatable expense-wise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know cost-wise. So when I was leaving, I want to say the department started getting weird, but it was like they were like, all right, well, you have $600 to spend on ballistic stuff, whatever. And then it was like, but that only covered like the level 3 gear.
Yeah.
And then I was like, if you want, or the 3A gear. Then I was like, if you want like the level 3 gear, you have to pay, an extra whatever, $200 or whatever dollars out of your own pocket.
I did not know that the department didn't spend taxpayer money on that until this conversation.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And it may, I don't know if it was just them or, how it works.
Well,
states may have different things.
I know that Shield 616, like I said, they started in Colorado because it was a Colorado Springs officer that started it. Mm-hmm. But it did go, like they've done Texas, they've done, they've done all these different agencies. And it's usually, so what it ended up being toward the tail end of, because I was on the department from 2011 to 21. So on the tail end, what it started being was guys graduating the academy would get all their gear on the back end, and they would do like whatever church started sponsoring like a whole academy.
Gotcha.
So they would do this, big ceremony thing to,
Yeah. Win-win.
Whatever. The marketing.
The church marketing.
Yeah. But yeah, and then that's when they started working with Angel Armor, to get the lighter stuff.
Yeah.
But
I like that name.
Yeah.
Sounds light.
Yeah, it was pretty.
It's pretty cool,
especially compared to what. But it was still just a hard plate. I mean, it was thin. It was probably,
Oh yeah, you can get a hard plate real thin and real ballistically savvy. So, I mean, like I said, we could do layers of polyethylene that'll stop a lot of stuff with it. And you compress 40 layers of that.
Right.
You're talking about 3+ rifle rounds. Yeah. So.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Like, all right, well, we're providing you this, but we're not providing you that.
I guess you guys keep it though too, right?
No.
You gave it back at the end, huh? Oh no.
Yeah, because you didn't pay for all of it.
Yeah, but I mean the church did, but then they're
no. The church stuff, it's not donated to you.
It's donated to the police.
It's donated to the department.
Handed to you, and you
given to you,
and then you give it back when you head out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because so I think it was they ended up changing a lot of stuff, but it was like $60. At least during the time that I was on, I remember that you could be gifted something. So you could not be gifted anything.
That's how they work.
That was over $60.
Gotcha.
So, because they didn't, whatever.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Getting bribed stuff.
We didn't want those police officers getting bribed.
Whatever. So it's like.
It was the same thing in the Army. It was like $20 was the most we could accept in the Army.
Yeah.
Stuff. People didn't see favoritism.
But yeah, I mean, I think that when you talk to me about it, I was like, man, there's a ton of applications that could go into, to include. So we had plates, like big giant plates that would be for like the size of the vehicles and stuff. So like our tactical guys would use those all the time, where it would basically just like go like hook over the door.
Gotcha.
And then it would just be like a big plate that's there. And most of those plates, at least at the time, did not serve like a dual purpose of being like a shield. So like when tactical, like, the first guy in that tactical line would have the shield with them, they were a completely separate thing. Whereas like something like that, based on what you're saying as far as being able to mold things into it or whatever.
Yeah, you can scale up and down as much as you want.
Could easily be like, all right, this is like a door panel, but it just has the handle on the other side.
Yeah.
That's, obviously you're making, in that application, a little stiffer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, man, there's a ton of different things that can be done that would be super beneficial, and obviously there's a big need for it, because I think that in those markets there's generally a couple companies that take over the industry, and it's like you get what you get.
Yep. Yeah.
So.
Yep. So, I don't know. You want to wrap this thing up?
Yeah.
All right.